The gentle rain cascaded in smooth, rhythmic waves, leaving the pavement slick and shimmering under the dim streetlights. Inside a parked police cruiser on an empty road, Officer Liam Harrison adjusted his tactical vest, casting a brief glance at his partner, Rex. The German Shepherd sat alert in the passenger seat, his sharp eyes carefully surveying the surroundings. They had responded to countless calls together, yet something about this one felt unusual. There was a gravity in the dispatcher's voice that Liam couldn't shake off, an unspoken urgency that pressed heavily against his chest. Unit 12. Reports indicate suspicious activity at the old warehouse on Western Drive. Possible presence of armed suspects. Proceed with caution. Backup is on the way, crackled the radio. Liam let out a slow breath, reaching over to give Rex a firm pat on the head. Just us for now, buddy. Stay sharp. Rex responded with a low, steady sound, his body tense, every muscle poised for action. The warehouse loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the stormy sky. Its peeling walls and rusted doors stood like silent sentinels, weathered by time. Rain dripped steadily from broken shingles above, each drop creating an eerie, rhythmic plinking in the quiet night. Liam advanced cautiously, his weapon ready, eyes scanning every shifting shadow. Rex moved in sync beside him, sniffing the damp air, ears flicking at the faintest sound. Then, Liam froze. Footsteps, quick, muffled, barely audible beneath the rain. Lifting his fist, he gave Rex the silent command to stop. The silence that followed was crushing, thick with tension. Then, without warning, a sharp metallic crash shattered the stillness, the sound of something tumbling and skidding across the concrete floor. Before Liam could fully register what was happening, a searing pain ripped through his left side. The force knocked him off balance, his vision wavering as he struggled to stay on his feet. His hand instinctively pressed against the wound, and when he pulled it away, his fingers came away slick with warm blood. His knees buckled. The world tilted. He hit the cold, rain-soaked ground, the pain threatening to pull him into darkness. Rex didn't move. He remained frozen beside his fallen partner, his unwavering stare fixed on the shifting shadows ahead. Then they appeared. 3 figures stepped into the dim glow of a distant street lamp, their outlines stark against the night. One of them gripped something in his hand, while the other 2 exchanged hushed, menacing whispers. Liam fought to speak, but his voice was barely a whisper. Rex, stay. But Rex didn't so much as blink. A low, rumbling growl built deep in his chest, a primal warning that he would not back down. Every muscle in his body was coiled, ready. His unwavering stance sent a clear message. If they wanted to get any closer, they would have to go through him. As Liam's strength drained away, Rex prepared to stand against the 3 men alone. What the loyal K-9 did next would not only alter the course of that night, but also prove the unshakable bond between a police officer and his partner. Rain pounded the pavement in relentless waves, but Rex never wavered. His stance was firm, paws rooted against the slick ground, ears pinned back in sharp focus. Just a few feet away, Liam lay motionless, his breath shallow, the crimson stain on his uniform spreading with every agonizing second. He fought to lift his head, to see what was unfolding, but his strength was slipping too fast. All he could do was listen, to the steady, unyielding growl coming from Rex, a sound filled with both warning and unwavering resolve. The 3 figures hesitated, their boots splashing through puddles as they closed the distance. They exchanged quick, uncertain glances. "It's just a dog," one of them muttered, but his voice lacked confidence. Rex's growl deepened, his powerful frame lowering in a defensive stance. His sharp eyes flickered between the men, tracking every movement, every slight shift. He could sense their hesitation, their doubt. The rain fell harder, soaking the tense standoff in an eerie stillness, thick with uncertainty. One of the men stepped forward, his movements slow and calculated. He extended a hand as if to show control, but the slight tremor in his fingers betrayed his hesitation. Rex didn't flinch. He held his ground, his intense gaze locked onto the intruder, every muscle in his body coiled like a spring. The man hesitated, then turned slightly, throwing a glance over his shoulder. "We don't have time for this. Grab the cop and let's go." Hearing those words, Liam summoned every last shred of strength he had left. His hand, shaking and weak, moved toward his radio, fingertips barely grazing the wet pavement. He tried to speak, but only a whisper escaped his lips. "Rex!" Though the word was faint, nearly lost in the rain, Rex's ears twitched at the sound of his name. Their bond had never needed words. It was built on trust, on loyalty, on an unbreakable connection that transcended commands. Rex's growl grew deeper, more menacing, vibrating through the air like a warning that could not be ignored. The men shifted uneasily, their confidence visibly cracking under the weight of the dog's unwavering presence. "Forget it. Let's go," one of them muttered, backing away. But before they could take another step, a distant sound cut through the steady drumming of the rain. Sirens. The faint wail grew steadily louder, slicing through the night like a beacon of impending justice. The three men exchanged frantic looks, their plan unraveling before them. Without another word, they melted into the darkness, disappearing as quickly as they had come. Rex remained motionless, his stance firm until he was sure the threat was gone. Only then did he turn, his full attention shifting back to Liam, his loyalty never once wavering. Rex moved swiftly to Liam's side, his soaked fur pressing against his partner's arm. Even through the haze of pain and exhaustion, Liam managed a weak smile. His trembling fingers reached out, brushing against Rex's neck in a silent gesture of gratitude. The sirens grew louder, their wailing echoing through the empty streets. Help was finally coming. But Rex didn't move. He stayed rooted beside Liam, his steady presence a silent vow. He wouldn't leave, no matter what happened next. Rescue was on its way, but what Rex had done that night would not be forgotten. His unwavering courage had turned the tide, his loyalty stronger than fear. What happened in the minutes that followed would forever seal the bond between a man and his dog. A bond forged in the heat of danger, tested by the weight of sacrifice. The flashing lights of backup units cut through the darkness, red and blue streaks reflecting off the rain-soaked pavement. Officers poured out of their vehicles, weapons raised, eyes sweeping the area for threats. Rex didn't budge. His body, drenched and exhausted, remained tense with vigilance. His sharp eyes tracked every movement as the officers approached. Even now, with help arriving, he stayed close, his protective instincts unshaken. A low growl rumbled in his chest at the sight of unfamiliar figures moving toward his wounded partner. A final act of loyalty. Proof that no matter what, he would always stand guard. "Officer down!" A first responder's urgent voice crackled through the radio. He sprinted to Liam's side, dropping to his knees as his gloved hand swiftly examined the wound. "Stay with us, Harrison," he urged, his voice firm yet filled with concern. Liam's eyelids fluttered weakly, and for a fleeting moment, his gaze locked onto Rex. Even as his strength faded, he struggled to speak. "Rex saved me," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the chaos surrounding him. Rex hesitated, his ears pinned back as the paramedics arrived and began their work. Nearby, Officer Carter crouched beside him, his voice gentle. "It's all right, buddy. We've got him now." But Rex barely moved, his unwavering eyes fixed on Liam, as if he grasped the weight of the moment. The paramedics acted fast, pressing firmly against the wound before carefully lifting Liam onto a stretcher. "He's in critical condition, but he's got a fighting chance," one of them assured as they prepared to transport him. Rex lunged forward, his paws scrambling against the cold metal of the ambulance, desperate to follow. A firm yet kind hand held him back. "Easy, Rex," an officer soothed. "He's in good hands now." Rex whimpered softly, pacing back and forth as the ambulance disappeared down the road with Liam inside. The other officers remained on high alert, fanning out to sweep the area for the suspects. "They can't have gone far," Carter said, his voice steady but laced with tension. His gaze flickered to Rex, who was still restless, his sharp instincts clearly picking up on something unresolved. Minutes passed, stretching the unease. Another officer approached Rex with a leash, hoping to settle him, but before he could secure it, Rex went rigid. His ears pricked forward and his body stiffened. A subtle sound, the faint crunch of gravel beneath a footstep, had caught his attention. The officers hadn't noticed it yet, but Rex had. A low, urgent bark escaped him as he spun toward the darkness. Carter's eyes immediately followed the dog's movement, his hand tightening around his holstered weapon. "What is it, Rex?" he asked. But there was no doubt. Rex had sensed something. The danger wasn't over. As the officers braced themselves to follow the dog's lead, the air grew thick with tension. Whatever lurked in the shadows was the very threat Liam had barely survived. The officers exchanged wary glances as Rex's sharp bark pierced the damp night air. His body was tense, ears pricked forward, and his eyes locked onto the darkness stretching beyond the warehouse. Officer Carter tightened his hold on his flashlight, his other hand hovering near his holstered weapon. "Spread out, but stay sharp," he instructed, his voice calm yet firm. "If Rex senses something, we need to trust him." Rex moved carefully toward the edge of the lot, his nose skimming the ground as he followed a trail. Rain slicked his fur, but he remained focused, each step deliberate. Carter stayed close behind, his flashlight slicing through the mist. The sound of gravel crunching underfoot was the only noise as they advanced, tension coiling in the air. Every shifting shadow seemed suspect, every distant sound magnified by the stillness around them. "Something over here," an officer called from the side of the warehouse. Rex's head snapped toward the voice, and in an instant, he was off, his tail held straight, a signal of unwavering focus. Carter and the others rushed after him, adrenaline spiking as they reached a partially open door. The dim glow of a flashlight illuminated fresh footprints in the damp earth, leading inside. Carter raised a hand for silence, signaling the team to spread out. Rex was the first to slip through the doorway, his paws landing soundlessly on the cold concrete. The warehouse was steeped in darkness, the air heavy with the sense of oil and damp mildew. Moving with precision, he kept his nose low, tracking the scent trail deeper into the shadows. Then, a noise, subtle but unmistakable, the shuffle of footsteps, a hushed curse. Carter lifted a hand, signaling the team to halt. Rex froze instantly, his ears flicking as he homed in on the sound. The air was thick with tension, every second stretching painfully long as they waited for whatever was coming next. Without warning, a figure sprang from behind a stack of crates, sprinting toward the far exit. "Freeze! Police!" Carter commanded, his voice cutting through the vast, empty space. Rex reacted instantly. With a powerful burst of speed, he tore after the fleeing suspect, his swift, precise movements closing the gap in mere seconds. The suspect glanced back, fear flashing across his face as the reality set in. There was no escaping the relentless K9 on his heels. As Rex gained ground on the fleeing suspect, the officers positioned themselves to cut off any escape. What unfolded next would highlight the unshakable trust between man and dog in the face of danger. The thunder of rapid footsteps echoed through the cavernous warehouse as Rex closed the distance. The suspect's panic was unmistakable. His ragged breaths and frantic glances over his shoulder betrayed his growing fear. Rex remained relentless, his lean body slicing through the air with purpose. Behind him, Officer Carter and the team surged forward, their voices commanding the man to halt, but it was Rex who led the chase. Reaching the far exit, the suspect grabbed for the door and yanked hard, but it jammed midway, groaning against the concrete floor. That brief hesitation was all Rex needed. With a single, explosive leap, he was upon the man, his deep, authoritative bark ringing through the warehouse like a final warning. The suspect froze, his hands shooting up instinctively as if surrender alone could pacify the unwavering K9. Rex held his ground, a low growl rumbling in his chest, his sharp gaze locked onto the man, daring him to make a move. Carter and the other officers arrived within seconds, weapons drawn. "Don't move," Carter commanded, his tone firm and unyielding. The suspect dropped to his knees, his hands still raised as the officers closed in to restrain him. Rex held his stance, his growl fading slightly but his unwavering focus remaining locked on the man. Only when Carter snapped the handcuffs around the suspect's wrist did Rex finally step back, his task complete. For now. As the officers began interrogating the suspect, another sound reached Rex's ears. A faint rustling from deeper within the warehouse. His ears twitched, his head turning sharply toward the disturbance. Carter caught the shift immediately. "What is it, Rex?" he asked, but the dog didn't pause for a command. With precise urgency, he moved forward, his steps quick and deliberate. Carter signaled the rest of the team, and they followed as Rex led them toward the far end of the warehouse. The air grew colder, a quiet hum of machinery mingling with the rhythmic drip of water from the leaking roof. They arrived at an old storage room, its door slightly ajar. Rex halted just outside, his nose working furiously as he sniffed the air. Letting out a low, deliberate bark, he stepped back and turned to Carter, as if signaling that it was the officer's turn to take the lead. Moving cautiously, they pushed the door open, their flashlights slicing through the gloom. Inside, crouched behind a pile of broken pallets, was the second suspect, gripping a makeshift weapon. "Hands where we can see them," an officer ordered sharply. The man hesitated, his fingers tightening around the object before he finally let it drop with a metallic clang, raising his hands in surrender. As the officers closed in to take him into custody, Rex remained nearby, his sharp gaze locked on the scene. Though both suspects had been caught, his posture stayed rigid, his alert stance hinting at one unmistakable truth: this night wasn't over yet. Rex's instincts had already proven crucial, but just as the team prepared to leave, the vigilant K9 sensed something was still off, a realization that would expose an even greater danger. Despite having two suspects in custody, the tension in the air remained thick. Rex's posture spoke volumes to the officers. This wasn't over. His keen eyes scanned the dimly lit warehouse, ears flicking at the faintest noises. Officer Carter crouched beside him, his voice steady. "What is it, buddy? You've got something, don't you?" Rex responded with a low, resolute bark before shifting his gaze toward the shadowy loading bay at the back. Carter signaled the team, his tone firm. "Stay alert. Rex is on to something." The officers moved with caution, their flashlights slicing through the gloom, revealing scattered debris and corroded machinery. Rex took the lead, nose close to the ground, following a scent that grew stronger with every step. Outside, the rain had eased, but water continued to drip from the warehouse roof, each droplet echoing eerily in the silence. As they neared the loading bay, Rex halted abruptly, his muscles tensed. A deep growl rumbled from his chest, his sharp eyes locking onto a large metal container shoved against the far wall. The container was battered and rusted, its lid slightly ajar. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. "That doesn't look right," one muttered, gripping his flashlight tighter. Carter advanced cautiously, weapon at the ready. "Cover me," he instructed. With precise control, he used the end of his flashlight to push the lid open further. What he saw made his stomach tighten. A small stockpile of weapons and a bag stuffed with cash and multiple IDs. "Looks like they had bigger plans," he murmured, stepping aside to let the others inspect the find. But before they could fully process the discovery, a sudden noise shattered the silence. A metallic creak, followed by the unmistakable rustling of movement overhead. Rex was the first to react, barking sharply before lunging toward the source of the sound. Flashlights snapped upward, revealing a third suspect perched on a steel beam, hiding and waiting for the right moment to strike. "There, on the beam," Carter called out as the man sprang into action, launching himself onto a stack of crates in a desperate bid to escape. But Rex was quicker. Before the suspect could gain any ground, the K9 surged forward, cutting off his path with a fierce, commanding bark. The man hesitated, startled by the dog's intensity. In seconds, the officers closed in, surrounding him with weapons raised. Trapped and out of options, the suspect slowly lifted his hands, his face drained of color in quiet surrender. With all suspects in custody, the officers assumed the night was finally coming to an end. But what lay hidden in the stash would unravel something far more significant than they had imagined. Though the tension in the warehouse began to ease with the third suspect secured, Rex remained on high alert. Officer Carter noticed the dog's unwavering focus on the container they had just examined. "What is it now, boy?" he murmured, lowering himself beside Rex. The K9 sniffed the air once more, then turned his attention back to the container, letting out a quiet but persistent bark. Carter exchanged a look with one of the officers. "Let's take a deeper look," he said, pulling on gloves before carefully sifting through the remaining contents of the container. What he uncovered made his stomach tighten. Beneath the weapons and cash lay a worn, water-stained folder stuffed with documents and maps. He spread them across a nearby crate, shining his flashlight over them. The maps were marked with multiple locations across the city, each circled and annotated with specific dates. "This wasn't just a robbery," Carter said, his voice tense. "They were planning something much bigger. These locations, they're critical infrastructure points. If this had gone through, it could have been disastrous." A heavy silence settled over the team as the weight of the discovery sank in. Even Rex, sensing the tension, let out a quiet, uneasy growl, as if he too grasped the significance of what they had just uncovered. One by one, the suspects were led out of the warehouse, their expressions a mixture of resentment and resignation. The third man, the one who had been hiding, glared as he was shoved into the back of a squad car. "You really think this changes anything?" he sneered, his voice laced with disdain. Carter didn't answer, only tightening his jaw as he shut the car door. Back inside the warehouse, Rex remained at his side as the rest of the officers cataloged the evidence. "If it weren't for him," one officer remarked, nodding toward the K9, "we might have walked right past this. Who knows how long it would have taken us to realize what they were planning." Carter gazed down at Rex, running his fingers gently behind the dog's ears. "He's more than just a partner," he murmured. "He's the reason we're all making it out of here tonight." As they prepared to leave the warehouse, Carter cast one last look around, the weight of the night pressing down on him. Rex sat close, his body finally at ease, though his sharp eyes continued to scan their surroundings. "You did great, buddy," Carter said, his voice thick with gratitude. "Liam's lucky to have you. We all are." With a final glance at the dimly lit warehouse, the team gathered the evidence and set off for the station. Rex had done more than just save lives that night. He had uncovered a scheme that could have left their city in ruins. As they drove away, the full magnitude of their discovery started to unfold, yet the danger was far from over. Another challenge loomed ahead, and once again, Rex would prove himself to be an irreplaceable hero. The early morning hours brought an eerie stillness to the station as the officers arrived with the suspects and the evidence. The rain continued to patter against the windows, but inside, the air buzzed with tension as the team worked to piece together the full scope of the conspiracy. Rex moved beside Carter, his tail swaying slightly now that the immediate threat had passed. But even in the midst of the controlled chaos, his sharp gaze never stopped watching, always ready for what came next. The evidence was laid out across a long table in the station's briefing room, maps, documents, and weapons forming a chilling puzzle. The marked locations weren't random. They included critical infrastructures like key bridges, a power substation, and even a hospital. The dates aligned with upcoming public events, times when these places would be packed with people. Carter leaned over the table, his hands gripping the edge. "They were planning a coordinated attack," he said, his voice low and tense. Captain Morales stepped into the room, her expression grim. "This isn't just a local issue anymore," she announced. "I've already contacted federal authorities. They'll be here by noon to take over." Her gaze flickered to Rex, who sat obediently beside Carter. "Make sure someone files a commendation for that dog. If not for him, we wouldn't have uncovered this in time." Carter nodded, a small, tired smile appearing at the corner of his lips. "He's the true hero tonight," he murmured, scratching Rex's neck affectionately. Meanwhile, Liam's condition remained critical but stable. Officers who had visited the hospital reported that he was awake but weak. His first words had been a question about Rex. Carter knew he needed to visit him soon, but there was still more work to do. Rex, however, seemed to sense something. He let out a soft whine, as if he too missed his partner. "You'll see him soon," Carter reassured the dog. In the interrogation rooms, the suspects remained silent, unwilling to cooperate. One of them, the man who had hidden on the warehouse beam, only smirked when pressed for answers. "You stopped us tonight," he said smoothly, "but you're too late to stop everything." His cryptic remark sent a chill through the room. Carter clenched his fists but kept his composure, his mind racing. He cast a glance at Rex, who stood by the door, ears pricked, his head tilted as if he, too, sensed the weight of the moment. As the hours stretched on, the team worked relentlessly, cross-referencing evidence, tracking known associates, and sending urgent updates to federal agencies. They all understood the stakes. They had disrupted one piece of a much larger plan, but the suspect's ominous words still hung heavily in the air. Rex remained close to Carter, a silent but steadfast presence. In a night filled with uncertainty, his watchful gaze reminded them all that sometimes the most dependable guardian walked on 4 legs instead of 2. Just as they thought they had gained control of the situation, a new lead shattered their fragile sense of containment. The tension in the station spiked as an analyst rushed into the briefing room, gripping a freshly decoded document. "We missed something," she said, her voice laced with urgency. She unrolled a map across the table, her finger landing on a location that hadn't been marked before, a shipping yard on the outskirts of town. One of the intercepted documents referenced a delivery scheduled for that very morning. "If we're right," she continued, barely catching her breath, "they might be planning to transport explosives or weapons to another location." A knot tightened in Officer Carter's stomach. The suspect's ominous words suddenly made sense. "The plan isn't over. How much time do we have?" he asked urgently. The analyst checked her watch. "If the timing in the document is correct, less than an hour." Carter's gaze shifted to Rex, who stood alert at his side, ears pricked, ready for action. "Let's move," Carter ordered without hesitation. In moments, his team was assembled and they tore through the streets, sirens wailing as they raced toward the shipping yard. When they arrived, an eerie silence blanketed the area. Towering shipping containers loomed like silent sentinels under the dull gray sky. Carter stepped out of the vehicle, his senses on high alert as Rex leaped down beside him. Without hesitation, the dog's nose went to work, sniffing the cool morning air before leading the team deeper into the maze of containers. The officers moved in tight formation, scanning every shadowed corner, their footsteps echoing ominously against the hard concrete. Rex came to an abrupt stop near a cluster of containers, his body rigid, nose pressed firmly to the ground. A sharp bark cut through the air. His signal. The team instantly zeroed in on a particular container. Carter motioned for the officers to secure the perimeter as he stepped forward to inspect it. The lock was broken, the door slightly ajar. With careful precision, he pulled it open, revealing a chilling sight. Crates filled with materials that could easily be used to build explosives. They had found a hidden cache, and they had arrived just in time. As the team moved swiftly to secure the evidence, a shout rang out from one of the officers standing guard. "Movement on the far side of the yard." 2 figures suddenly sprang from behind a stack of containers, making a desperate attempt to flee. Rex didn't hesitate. With a burst of power, he launched forward, his speed unmatched as he closed in on the escaping suspects. Carter and the rest of the team took off after him, but it was clear the dog would reach them first. With the suspects cornered and the cash secured, the mission was heading toward its final decisive moments. Both man and dog would be put to the ultimate test, leading to an ending that none of them would ever forget. Rex surged forward, locked onto his targets as they weaved frantically through the towering rows of shipping containers. Behind him, the officers kept pace, boots slamming against the rain-slicked concrete. But there was no doubt, Rex was the fastest. His bark rang out, sharp and commanding a final warning to the fugitives. They were running out of time, and they were running out of places to hide. The two men looked back in terror, realizing they had misjudged the relentless pursuit of the police dog. As one of them tripped, slipping on the wet soil, Rex was on him in moments, barking loudly to signal the approaching officers. The man stopped, his hands lifted in surrender, while the police closed in to arrest him. However, the other suspect kept running, heading straight for a truck at the yard's boundary, fueled by sheer desperation. Carter yelled, "Rex, go!" and the dog sprinted towards the truck with astounding speed. The suspect managed to climb into the driver's seat, fumbling for the keys. Yet, just as he tried to start the truck, Rex jumped onto the step, barking with intense ferocity. The noise caused the man to drop the keys, his hands shaking with fear. Carter and his fellow officers quickly reached the truck, extracting the suspect and handcuffing him. As the turmoil subsided into an uncanny silence, only punctuated by distant sirens signaling reinforcements, the suspects were led away. Kneeling beside Rex, who was still alert though visibly tired, Carter said with a hint of awe in his voice, "You did it, buddy. You stopped them." Rex responded by leaning into Carter's touch as he gently scratched behind his ears, their connection deepening in that moment. Nearby, the officers secured a stash of explosives, ensuring the hazardous materials would not reach their sinister destination. Back at the station, news of Rex's bravery had already spread. Officers lined up to welcome the team, clapping and offering congratulations, especially to their four-legged hero. Later, Carter brought Rex to see Liam in the hospital. Despite his frailty, Liam's face lit up when Rex bounded in, tail thrashing with joy. "You saved my life, boy," Liam whispered, extending a hand to stroke Rex's fur. The dog tenderly nuzzled his partner, silently vowing to always guard him against harm. The operation was a success. The suspects were caught and the city was secure, all thanks to the valor of an extraordinary K9. Rex's deeds would not only be celebrated as heroic, but also stand as a lasting tribute to the profound bond between humans and their loyal canine companions.